being in Brooklyn, you start to think about, random boxing topics. What Brooklyn boxing, Brooklyn style boxing. Obviously, we got Brooklyn boxing with Barclays Center having really shined a light upon Brooklyn fighters. But when you think about Brooklyn fighters through the years, there's guys, we've done a little bit about this, the top Brooklyn fighters, and my favorite Brooklyn fighters and guys that motivated me and inspired me. If you're boxing in Brooklyn at any given point, you're going to be in the gym probably, or you're going to come across fighters that are at the top of the sport, that are in Brooklyn at that moment. Maybe not. I don't know so much this generation, because I feel like a lot of fighters end up leaving Brooklyn because it got so expensive here, and it's more bang for your buck to be somewhere else. But in reality, man, I can remember, being in the gym, and Breland was at the end of his career or just retiring. Junior Jones was training. Zab Judah was just coming up. This is right around the time that I started boxing. So you had the Brooklyn guys like that. Riddick Bowe was just retiring. You'd come across random guys, and all of New York in general had top fighters. Even you had a welterweight title fight that was basically a battle of Battle of New York, Battle of the Boroughs, when you had Superman Davis and Mark Breland going for fighting for the WBA welterweight title, a title that I later would have, ironically. But decades later, of course. But you had certainly the boroughs had so many good fighters that you could have inter-borough rivalries just from them. What makes a Brooklyn fighter? What makes a New York fighter? Skill, grit, hunger. I think your character gets tested when you're coming up in New York. You're sort of forced to grow up. Sometimes you're forced to grow up a little faster than people that come from other places. You got balls. You gotta really. You got no choice but to grow up that way. But to have them if you're gonna survive in that kind of world that it was at that time. And boxing saved a lot of us. I know boxing really helped me in my life, and really turned kind of. I was at a fork in the road, and it really. I made the turn into boxing as opposed to any other direction. And I think that was pretty much the only direction that I could have went at that time that would have gone positive for me. And the reason I say that is not because, you say, oh, well, you could have done something else. I wasn't really, knowing my mindset at that time, I wasn't going to do anything else. I wasn't going to do anything positive, what I'm saying, anything else that was positive. At that time in my life, it was just, I wasn't going to go back to school. I wasn't going to go get an office job. I wasn't going to become some kind of entrepreneur. I wasn't, you didn't have like you have today, where these kids just want to be YouTubers, or they just want to be, you didn't have any of those options. I wasn't going to randomly become like a BMX bike rider. It's like I wasn't going to become a skater. I wasn't, it's like, there was only bad options, and then there was boxing, and boxing was just right for me because, like many Brooklyn fighters, I had a little bit of a tough background as far as the way I grew up, even with inner family turmoil and struggles, and then getting kicked out of school, and getting into my own trouble and whatnot, and it was the violence fed me. You know what I'm saying? The violence of boxing allowed me to be fed of that anger and bloodthirst that I had at that time, while pushing me in a positive direction, while giving me guidance and giving me a sort of a cornerstone for my life without me realizing it. Because honestly, and I don't know about everybody else, but I'll tell you what, most fighters come from humble backgrounds, rough backgrounds, especially when you're an old school New York fighter. And I don't think we're at the moment in our life when we're at that point, I don't think we're the kind of people that are just gonna, you're gonna be told, how to do it right, and you're just gonna accept it. At that time, you just got so much going in your life. There's a lot of problems, unfortunately, and problematic situations. It's a lot of times with young people, when they don't have good guidance, they end up figuring out problematic solutions. So boxing was a big safety net for a lot of people. Certainly was a big safety net for me. And I got to the gym, and I suddenly had new kind of guys to look up to. You know what I'm saying? I started sparring with Junior Jones a lot, and that was a famous Brooklyn boxer. That was a boxer who had been a world champion and had done a lot in his career. And Junior had a short prime, but man, what explosive prime he had. He gave Marco Antonio Barrera his first loss. I remember him beating Orlando Canizales on the Gotti Rodriguez card in Madison Square Garden, which was an unbelievable card. Looking back now, that was an unbelievable card. I mean, you had Junior Jones versus Canizales, and then you had a Gotti Rodriguez. To tell you the truth, Junior was always a fun fighter. Junior's part of another big HBO card that was really explosive. I mean, Nassim Ahmed, Kevin Kelly was a Madison Square Garden main event, and the co-main event was Junior Jones and Kennedy McKinney, which gets lost in the shuffle because Hamed versus Kelly was such a good fight. But Jones and McKinney was a good fight, man. I mean, Jones is beating the hell out of Kennedy, and then all of a sudden Kennedy knocks him out with a right hand. That was Junior's problem. He was incredible fighter, incredible talent, but didn't have a great chin and great survival skills. But either way, again, ballsy. See, Junior the same way. You know, he tried to fight his way out of trouble. Riddick Bowe, skilled fighter, but he liked to go at it, and that's why the Holyfield fights were so famous. Mike Tyson, listen, Mike Tyson's known for having intimidated a lot of guys and knocked guys out cold and all that hard hitting. But even when guys resisted him at that point in his career, you know, you got the Douglas loss where he didn't just go away quietly. You know what I mean? He stayed in there and stayed in there like a man, regardless of how bad it was going, until he did get knocked out. But then even when he comes back from the loss, you know, you got 2 fights with Donovan Razor Ruddock, bro. Razor Ruddock was a G at that time, bro. He's underrated now because, you know, he didn't win a world title and people just forgot about him. But Ruddock was a dangerous guy at that time. Tyson went a lot of rounds with Ruddock in 2 fights. You know what I'm saying? Like, and he fought there. You know, so people think about New York fighters and they think, oh, you know, the Brooklyn fighters in general, and they think of, like, you know, okay, there's a toughness to us, there's a grit to us. We have all that, but bro, there's a skill to us, there's balls to us, there's a combination that makes a New York fighter. And this is not a knock on other regions of the United States or even of the world, because, you know, champions come from all over the world. You know, boxing surely is a worldwide sport that creates fighters from all over the place, and then stylistically we blend together and we fight and we give entertaining fights. But you know, Brooklyn certainly plays a big part. And then also knowing you're coming up at a time where, in a place where it has a reputation, you want to live up to it too, man. You want to sort of be talked about among those Brooklyn fighters and be like, yo, yeah, I'm a Brooklyn fighter. I got a reputation to uphold, you know? Listen, most boxers are not going to make it, okay? Most people that enter a boxing gym, they're not going to become championship level fighters. But once you start to realize you're pretty good, and once you start to realize you might be going places with this, you start to kind of tell yourself, yo, man, you know, there's guys that laid the building blocks for people like me, and they really, like, I look up to those guys, man. I gotta, you know, if people start to talk about me as a Brooklyn fighter, which they were at the time of my career when I was coming up, I gotta represent too, you know, and you know, that's what that's sort of like, it became like a prideful thing for me. You know, I loved representing Brooklyn, and you'll see old school Brooklyn now, not so much, but old school Brooklyn, man, all those fighters that were from old school Brooklyn, it was part of our identity. There was, you know, you were known for whatever style you had, whatever your fighting ability. You were known to be a world-class fighter, but you also, the identity of Brooklyn really stayed with you, you know, and it was something you wore on your sleeve, and it beat inside your blood, you know, inside your heart, inside and run through the blood in your veins. You know, it was something that you really use as motivation, and that's it, man. I mean, there's, like I said, there's probably Brooklyn fighters that I'm probably not even mentioning. I mean, I've only mentioned a handful. I've done other stories about New York and Brooklyn in general, but, you know, for me that was a big deal. And you know, having shared the gym, shared the ring even, and being able to having been able to look up to those guys, you know, as a fan, as a kid coming up the ladder, you know, I was happy to be able to have become a world champion out of Brooklyn myself. I mean, Zab was a guy who was coming up and had a lot of push. You know, I think of guys like Zab Judah, who, you know, while I'm looking up to these championship guys like Junior Jones and you know, the OGs that were sort of coming to the end of their careers or had just retired, and you had a guy like Zab Judah who was just exploding onto the scene, had been an Olympic alternate, was one of the top prospects in all of boxing, and he was training in my gym, you know. And sometimes I remember, but I just started, like, literally, I mean, I was just starting to spar. I didn't have an amateur fight yet, and sometimes I just spend the day in the gym. I mean, you know, people didn't know this. You know, at that time, I was just a blip on the screen in the gym, you know, in a packed gym, and people didn't, you know, nobody's really paying attention to me except my trainer. I would spend the whole day there, man. And at nighttime, I knew Zab would train, and sometimes when I'd spend the whole day there, I'd know that, you know, Zab was going to spar at night, and I'd sit there watching Zab spar, and man, it was just violent, vicious. I mean, Gleason's gym in general, I just had violent, vicious sparring, you know, of the kind of which that I would partake many, many rounds myself in as I got better and better, and through my whole years in boxing. But at that time, it's everything's all new to me. I'm just soaking it in, and it was really, really interesting to see, exciting to see, and been able to see. It's one thing when you see it on TV. It's another thing when you're sitting there in the gym and you're just looking at it, and it's just the blood, the sweat just flying off of guys. Watching guys' reactions, watching guys, coming back to their corner in the sparring, and people yelling across the ring back and forth to each other, trainers and whatnot. Again, things that eventually I would end up partaking in myself. It was really interesting, and Brooklyn attracts guys from all over the world. I can remember sparring guys like Mauricio Martinez, who was a Panamanian world super bantamweight champion, and was a Brooklyn fighter because he was Panamanian but living in Brooklyn, and he ended up becoming a WBO world bantamweight champion. Very, very crafty southpaw. Did a lot of rounds with him too. Really a lot of things learned. Just the Brooklyn boxing gyms in general have a lot of. We got a straggler, little kid. Don't worry, the parents are over there, so she's okay. But yeah, so I mean, you had even guys that would come to Brooklyn and weren't maybe raised in Brooklyn, but now partaking in that Brooklyn boxing folklore, that Brooklyn boxing environment in the gym. And I remember guys like Mauricio Martinez did a lot of rounds with. Regilio Torre as well. Regilio Torre was a 1988 Olympic bronze medalist, also a WBO world champion at 130 pounds. Keep in mind that when I started, I was training at I was fighting at 125 pounds in the amateurs, then 132 pounds, and I turned pro at 135 pounds. Julio Torre was around, and I did some rounds with him. Learned a lot from guys like that as well. So much, interwoven. So much of a foundation interwoven in all these guys. Really, it's so you have such an advantage when you're from a place like this. And I can only speak for, again, I'm not talking about that other places don't have advantages, but you had such an advantage being from Brooklyn at that time. Like I could imagine, I started boxing late. If I would have been in the wrong town or the wrong city, if I walk in the wrong gym, maybe I never make it, and I never go anywhere. But I have all the talent in the world, I have all the anger in the world at that time, but I was way behind. I started boxing at 16. Like I needed a place like Gleason's to, force to really test that fire that I had in me. If you were really hungry and really determined to make it, Gleason's gym in Brooklyn was going to test you, because, if you didn't really want it, man, you'd have enough bad days there that you'd end up wanting to quit, But if you really wanted it, those bad days will force you to get better and better, and that's eventually what happened to me. Again, Brooklyn boxing all the way, baby.